The bridge of the horizon's edge hummed with quiet activity as the ship drifted through the darkness of space. Captain Daniel Harper sat in his command chair, reviewing the day's survey data on his tablet. They were 3 months into their exploration mission, mapping uncharted systems in the Orion Arm. It was routine work, mostly peaceful. Exactly the kind of assignment Harper had hoped for after 20 years in the service. Lisa Martinez sat at her communications station, her eyes scanning multiple screens filled with signal data. She was monitoring the usual background noise of space, stellar radiation, pulsar echoes, the occasional automated beacon from distant trade routes. Then, something changed. A new signal appeared on her screen, weak and fragmented, but definitely artificial. "Captain, I'm picking up something unusual," Lisa said, adjusting her equipment to filter out the interference. "It's a distress call, I think. But it's not using any human protocols." Harper straightened in his chair. "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled to life. At first, there was only static and strange warbling sounds. Then, the universal translator kicked in, processing the alien language. The voice that emerged was desperate, tinged with fear. "This is Velic Colony. Under attack. Ships burning. Please. Anyone. Help us. Sending coordinates. Please." The message repeated several times before dissolving back into static. The bridge crew exchanged glances. First contact with an alien species was always a significant event, but this was far from the peaceful meeting humanity had hoped for. "Can you clean that up?" Harper asked. Lisa worked her console, running the signal through multiple filters. "It's badly damaged. Probably from interference or distance. But I'm getting coordinates. It's close, Captain. Really close. About 3 light-years from our current position." Kyle Bennett, the sensor technician, was already running scans. "I'm detecting energy signatures in that direction. Big ones. Could be weapons fire." Harper stood and walked to the main view screen. 3 light-years. In cosmic terms, that was practically next door. Whatever was happening, it was happening now, and they were close enough to do something about it. "Options," Harper said, looking at his crew. His first officer, Amanda Cruz, pulled up the relevant regulations on her screen. "First contact protocols are clear, Captain. We're not supposed to interfere in alien conflicts. We're supposed to observe, report, and let command make the decision. By the time we report this and wait for orders, whatever's happening there will be over," said Dr. Peter Graham, from his position near the medical station. The ship's chief medical officer rarely spoke up during tactical discussions, but when he did, people listened. "Someone is dying and asking for help. That's not a political situation. That's a medical emergency." Jacob Torres, the security chief, leaned against the tactical console. "We're a science vessel, Captain. We've got defensive weapons, but we're not built for combat. If we jump into a war zone, we might not be able to help anyone. We might just become another casualty." It was a fair point. The horizon's edge was designed for exploration and research, not battle. Her shields could handle micrometeorites and radiation, but they weren't military grade. Her weapons were meant to clear debris or defend against pirates, not face whatever was capable of destroying an entire colony. Harper considered the options. The safe choice was obvious. Report to command, wait for instructions, continue their mission. No one would blame him for following protocol, but he kept hearing that voice in his head. The desperation in the alien's plea. "How long would it take us to get there?" he asked. Kyle checked his calculations. "At maximum, FTL, about 6 hours. And how long do you think they have?" The young technician hesitated. "Based on the energy readings I'm seeing, Captain, I'd say not long. Maybe hours. Maybe less." Harper walked back to his chair but didn't sit. He stood there, one hand resting on the armrest, thinking. His crew watched him, waiting. They all knew what he was deciding. This wasn't just about following orders or breaking protocol. This was about who they were, what humanity stood for. Lisa, Try to send a response, Harper said finally. Tell them. Help is coming. Amanda looked at him sharply. Captain, if we do this— I know, Harper interrupted. I know what the regulations say. But I also know what my conscience says. We didn't come out here to ignore people in trouble. Set course for those coordinates. Maximum speed. The bridge came alive with activity. Lisa sent the response message, hoping it would reach the aliens. Kyle plotted the course. The ship's engineer, Nicole Sanders, reported from the engine room that the FTL drive was charging up. Within minutes, the horizon's edge was ready to jump. All stations report ready, Amanda said. Despite her earlier caution, she wasn't arguing anymore. Harper could see the determination in her eyes. His crew was with him. Take us in, Harper ordered. The ship lurched slightly as the FTL drive engaged. Stars stretched and blurred on the view screen. And they were off, racing toward an unknown situation, to help people they'd never met. During the 6-hour journey, the crew prepared. Jacob Torres ran his security teams through combat drills, just in case. Nicole Sanders checked and rechecked every system, making sure the ship could handle whatever they found. Dr. Graham prepared the medical bay for casualties. Lisa kept monitoring the distress signal, which continued to repeat, growing slightly weaker each time. Harper sat in his ready room, reviewing everything they knew about this region of space. It wasn't much. Human exploration had only recently reached this far. There were a few scattered reports from long-range probes, mentions of possible civilizations, but nothing concrete. Humanity was still new to the galactic community, still learning that they weren't alone in the universe. He thought about Earth, about the history of his species. Humanity had always been fighters. They'd had to be. Earth wasn't a kind world. It was a planet where almost everything could kill you, where survival meant learning to be tough, smart, and stubborn. Humans had fought their way to the top of their world's food chain, then fought each other for thousands of years, and finally learned to work together to reach the stars. The crew of the Horizon's Edge stared at the view screen in horror. 12 warships circled the burning planet like vultures around dying prey. 3 of them were massive, easily 3 times the size of the human vessel. The others were smaller, but still dangerous-looking, bristling with weapons. Kyle Bennett's hands flew over his sensor console. Captain, I'm reading massive energy discharges from those ships. Plasma weapons, kinetic bombardment, some kind of fusion missiles. They're not just attacking military targets. They're hitting everything. Life signs? Harper asked, his voice tight. Faint readings on the surface, scattered. The population must have been much larger before this started. Kyle paused, his young face pale. Captain, I'm also picking up smaller ships trying to escape. Civilian craft. Unarmed. The warships are hunting them down. As if to confirm his words, one of the alien warships fired. A bright lance of energy crossed the space between orbits, and a tiny escape pod simply ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, just there one moment, gone the next. Amanda Cruz pulled up tactical data on her screen. Those are Krath ships, Captain. I recognize the design from the intelligence briefings. The Krath Imperium. They're a hostile species, known for conquest and slavery. They've taken over dozens of systems in the past century. Why would they attack a colony world? Dr. Graham asked. What could possibly justify this? They don't need justification, Amanda replied grimly. From what we know, the Krath operate on pure power politics. They take what they want, when they want it. Anyone weaker is prey. Harper felt cold anger building in his chest. He'd seen warfare before, but always between military forces, soldiers who'd chosen to fight. This was different. This was slaughter. This was genocide. Can we identify the species being attacked? He asked. Lisa was already working on it. I'm picking up transmissions from the surface, running them through the translator now. She listened for a moment, then looked up. They call themselves the Velic, herbivorous species, peaceful culture. They're farmers, Captain. This is an agricultural colony. End quote. Farmers. People who grew food, raised families, lived quiet lives. Now their world was burning, and aliens with superior weapons were making sure none of them survived. Jacob Torres moved closer to the tactical display. Captain, we need to assess our capabilities. That's a full Krath battle fleet. 3 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 3 light frigates. We have 1 science vessel, with moderate shields, and light defensive weapons. So we're outgunned, Harper said. Completely, Jacob confirmed. In a straight fight, any one of those heavy cruisers could destroy us. All 12 together? We wouldn't last 5 minutes. Nicole Sanders appeared on the view screen, calling from the engine room. Her face was streaked with grease, and her expression was serious. Captain, I've been listening to the tactical assessment. If we're thinking about engaging, I need to be honest with you. Our weapons weren't designed for ship-to-ship combat. We could damage their shields, maybe. But we don't have the firepower to take down even one of those warships. Harper nodded slowly. What do we have, Nicole? We've got mining charges for clearing asteroid debris. We could modify them as makeshift missiles, but they're slow and easy to shoot down. We've got point defense lasers for taking out small meteorites. Against armored warships, they'd be like throwing pebbles at a tank. She paused. And we've got the quantum drive. Explain. It's experimental technology, Captain. We use it to make precise FTL jumps for survey work. But it generates some exotic energy fields. I've been thinking about it, and I might be able to repurpose those fields as a weapon. Sort of an electromagnetic pulse, but much more powerful. It could scramble their sensors and targeting systems. For how long? Maybe 5 minutes, maybe less, and I can only do it once. The power drain would be massive. But it would give us an opening, Jacob said thoughtfully. He studied the tactical display with new interest. If we could blind them, even temporarily, we could use hit and run tactics. Strike fast, hit weak points, then run before they can respond. Amanda shook her head. It's still suicide, Captain. Even if Nicole's pulse works, even if we manage to damage a few ships, they'll eventually overwhelm us. And that's assuming they don't call for reinforcements. She was right, of course. The smart thing to do was leave. Report what they'd seen. Let Earth Command handle it through diplomatic channels. But Harper couldn't stop thinking about those escape pods being destroyed, about the farms burning on the planet below, about desperate people who'd called for help and received only silence. Lisa, can you reach the Velic leadership? I'll try, Captain. It took several minutes, but Lisa finally established contact. The face that appeared on the screen was alien, but somehow gentle. Large eyes, soft features, a body covered in fine fur. The Velic looked like prey animals, Harper realized. They probably evolved as herbivores, peaceful and community-focused. No wonder they hadn't been able to defend themselves against the Krath. This is Captain Daniel Harper of the human vessel Horizon's Edge. We received your distress call. The alien's large eyes widened with something like hope. We thought we would die alone. Why didn't anyone help? Harper asked. The Velic, who introduced himself as Elder Counselor Venom, made a gesture that might have been a sad smile. Because to interfere with the Krath is death, Captain. They are powerful, their empire vast. Those who stand against them are destroyed. The other civilizations chose survival over compassion. We do not blame them. It is the way of the galaxy. That's a terrible way, Dr. Graham said quietly. Perhaps, Venom agreed. But it is reality. The strong dominate, the weak perish. This is the law of space. He paused. Why did you come, Captain Harper? Your species is new to the stars. You have no obligation to us. You risk your ship, your crew, your people standing with the Krath. Why? Harper thought about how to explain. How did you tell an alien about Earth, about humanity's history, about what it meant to come from a world that tried to kill you every single day? We come from a death world, he said finally. I do not know this term. Earth is classified as a Class 12 hazard world. Almost everything on our planet evolved to be dangerous. Predators, diseases, weather, plants, insects, even some of the water is deadly. Humans survived by learning to fight back, by refusing to give up, even when the odds were impossible. We're stubborn, counselor, and we learned a long time ago that the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Venom was quiet for a moment. Your world sounds terrifying. It is, Harper agreed. But it made us strong, and it taught us that someone has to stand up to bullies, even when it's dangerous, even when it's stupid, especially then. You cannot defeat 12 Krath warships with one science vessel, Venom said gently. You will die with us, Captain. Your courage honors us, but it changes nothing. Harper smiled grimly. Maybe. But before we die, we're going to make them regret every single moment of this attack. The Krath are about to learn what happens when you anger Deathworlders. He closed the connection and turned to his crew. Every face showed determination mixed with fear. They knew what he was asking of them. They knew the odds. The horizon's edge moved through space like a predator stalking prey. Hannah Brooks sat at the helm, her fingers dancing across the controls with practiced ease. Before joining the exploration service, she'd been a racer, flying atmospheric craft through canyons and around obstacles at speeds that terrified most people. Now she was putting those skills to military use, and she felt her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. Approaching the Krath formation, she reported. They haven't noticed us yet. The human ship was running dark, all unnecessary systems powered down, using the debris field from destroyed Velic stations as cover. The Krath sensors were focused on the planet below, on hunting the last survivors. They weren't expecting an attack. That was their first mistake. Ryan, you ready? Harper asked his tactical officer. Ryan Phillips nodded, his hands steady on the weapons console. He'd spent the past hour reprogramming their systems, turning scientific equipment into weapons. It wasn't elegant, but it would work. Targets locked, Captain. Their communication relays first, just like we planned. Nicole, how's that quantum pulse coming? Ready when you are, Nicole's voice came through the comm. But remember, I can only fire it once, and we'll need at least 10 minutes to recharge the drive afterward. If we need to run before then, we'll be stuck at sublight speeds. Understood. Harper took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would either save the Velic or doom them all. All stations. This is the captain. Remember, speed is our weapon. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we don't stop moving. Hannah, the moment Ryan fires, I want you to push this ship harder than you've ever pushed anything. Yes, sir, Hannah said with a fierce grin. Fire. Ryan's fingers stabbed down on the controls. Modified mining charges launched from the horizon's edge, streaking toward the Krath fleet. They weren't fast by military standards, but they didn't need to be. The Krath weren't expecting an attack. The charges struck 3 communication relays, destroying them in brilliant flashes of light. The Krath fleet immediately went into alert status, but their coordination was already compromised. Without the relays, the individual ships couldn't communicate effectively with each other. They were blind and deaf, at least temporarily. Nicole, now, Harper shouted. The quantum drive hummed to life, but instead of opening a path through space for FTL travel, it directed all its exotic energy outward in a massive pulse. The wave of energy washed over the Krath fleet like an invisible tsunami. Shields flickered and died. Sensor arrays went dark. Targeting computers scrambled, showing gibberish instead of enemy positions. 2 of the heavy cruisers drifted helplessly, their systems completely offline. The other Krath ships fared better, their redundant systems kicking in, but they were still confused, still trying to understand what had hit them. Go, 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 Harper ordered. Hannah threw the ship into a dive that would have torn apart a less robust vessel. The horizon's edge plunged toward the 2 disabled cruisers, moving at speeds that made the stars blur. The Krath finally started shooting, but their aim was terrible. Plasma bolts and missiles flew past, missing by dozens of meters. Targeting their reactor housings, Ryan said. Firing. More mining charges launched, but these had been modified even further. Nicole had packed them with every explosive material they had on board. They were crude, ugly weapons. But when they slammed into the exposed reactor sections of the disabled cruisers, they were devastatingly effective. The first cruiser's shields were down. The charges punched through the hull and detonated deep inside. Secondary explosions rippled along the ship's length. Atmosphere vented into space. The massive warship began to list, power failing, atmosphere bleeding away. The second cruiser's captain had managed to get partial shields back online, but they weren't strong enough. The charges overwhelmed them, tearing into the reactor housing. This time, the entire reactor destabilized. The cruiser exploded in a miniature sun, bright enough to make the view screen darken automatically. 2 down, Jacob reported, disbelief in his voice. We actually took down 2 heavy cruisers, but there was no time to celebrate. The rest of the Krath fleet was recovering, their systems coming back online. And they were angry. 8 contacts breaking formation, Kyle warned. They're coming after us. Hannah, get us into that debris field, Harper ordered, pointing at the wreckage of a destroyed Velix station. The pilot didn't hesitate. She threw the ship into a series of maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible for a vessel this size. They spun, dove, and weaved through chunks of metal and frozen atmosphere, using the debris as cover. Krath weapons fire followed them. But the enemy ships were designed for open space combat. They couldn't match Hannah's precision flying through obstacles. Captain, I've got an idea, Jacob said suddenly. One of those disabled cruisers is still mostly intact. If we could board it, take control of some of its systems, we could turn it against the others. That's insane, Amanda said. That's perfect, Harper corrected. Jacob, take your team. The security chief was already moving, gathering his people. They assembled in the shuttle bay, checking weapons and equipment. Humans had fought wars for thousands of years. They knew about boarding actions, about close combat in confined spaces, about using enemy weapons against them. The shuttle launched, piloted by one of Hannah's best students. It zipped through the battle, too small and fast for the Krath to target effectively. Within minutes, they docked with the crippled cruiser. Jacob led his team through the airlock. The interior of the Krath ship was dark, emergency lighting only. The air was thin, venting slowly into space through hull breaches. They moved quickly through corridors designed for beings larger than humans, using their smaller size as an advantage. They encountered their first Krath in a main corridor. The alien was huge, easily 8 feet tall, with armored scales and claws that could tear through metal. It roared at the sight of the humans, a sound that would have paralyzed prey species. Jacob's team opened fire. The Krath had never fought humans before. They were used to species that fled from aggression, that tried to negotiate or surrender. These small creatures did neither. They worked together with frightening efficiency, using grenades to disorient, then closing in with weapons that fired solid projectiles at hypersonic speeds. The Krath warrior fell, wounded but alive. Jacob's team moved past it, heading for the bridge. They encountered more resistance, but each time, human tactics won out. Flashbangs to blind and disorient, smoke grenades to provide cover, coordinated fire that came from multiple angles. This is insane, one of Jacob's team members said as they fought through another group of Krath. They're twice our size and built like tanks. Yeah, Jacob agreed, shooting another enemy. But we're from Earth. We eat tanks for breakfast. They reached the bridge to find it defended by the ship's captain and his command crew. War leader Drakthos was a veteran of 40 campaigns. A warrior who'd never known defeat. He looked at the humans with a mixture of confusion and rage. What are you? He demanded in broken universal language. We're humans, Jacob replied, aiming his weapon. "And you just attacked our friends." The fight was brief and brutal. The Krath were stronger, but humans were faster and more tactical. They used the bridge's own equipment as cover, forced the enemy into crossfires, exploited every advantage. Within minutes, Drakthos was wounded and his crew subdued. "Bridge secured," Jacob reported to the horizon's edge. "And Captain? You're not going to believe this. This ship still has partial weapons capability." Harper smiled. "Then I suggest you use them." On the Krath command ship, Fleet Commander Vexoth watched in disbelief as one of his own cruisers began firing on his fleet. The weapons were poorly aimed, obviously controlled by someone unfamiliar with Krath systems, but they were still dangerous. His formation broke apart as captains tried to avoid friendly fire. "What manner of enemy is this?" Vexoth demanded. "Who are these humans?" His intelligence officer had been searching their databases. "They are new to space, Commander. Their species only achieved FTL travel within the last 50 years. They come from a planet classified as..." The officer paused, reading something that seemed to surprise him. "Classified as a Class 12 death world. Impossible. No sentient species can evolve on a Class 12 world." The news of the human attack spread through the Krath Imperium's command structure like wildfire. On the Imperial homeworld, Fleet Admiral Zargoth received the reports with growing disbelief. A single alien vessel, barely armed, had destroyed 2 heavy cruisers and captured a third. It was impossible. It was humiliating. "Send reinforcements." Zargoth ordered his staff. 6 more warships, including the Conqueror's Fang. And make sure Fleet Commander Vexoth understands that failure is not acceptable. The Imperial dreadnought Conqueror's Fang was a monster among warships. It was twice the size of the heavy cruisers, armed with enough firepower to level a city from orbit. Its captain, Supreme War Leader Koreth, was known throughout the Empire as a merciless warrior. He had never lost a battle. "These humans," Koreth mused as his ship prepared to jump to FTL. "What do we know of them?" His intelligence officer provided what little information they had. "A young species. Supreme War Leader. They only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their technology is inferior to ours. However, they come from what our classification system calls a death world. A DOC. Explain. A planet with extreme environmental hazards, high gravity, dangerous predators, deadly diseases, volatile weather. Most species cannot survive on such worlds, let alone evolve sentience there." Koreth nodded slowly. The Krath homeworld was a paradise compared to what was being described. Easy prey, gentle climate, few natural dangers. Perhaps that explained something about these humans. They'd been forged in a harder crucible. "It matters little," Koreth decided. "Courage cannot defeat superior firepower. We will crush them and make an example of their species." Back in the Velic system, the crew of the Horizon's Edge was receiving unexpected news. Captain Harper stared at the communication from Earth Command, reading it 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. "They're ordering us to withdraw," he said quietly to his senior officers. "Immediately." Amanda looked troubled. "Did they say why?" "Politics. Apparently, the Krath Imperium has lodged a formal protest with the Galactic Council. They're threatening war against humanity if we don't back down. Command says we can't afford a conflict with the Krath, not when we're still establishing ourselves among the spacefaring civilizations." "So they want us to just leave?" Nicole asked from the engine room view screen. "Leave the Velic to die? That's what they're ordering." "Yes." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what this meant. They could follow orders, save themselves, and let an entire species be wiped out. Or they could disobey, stay and fight, and face court-martial. If they survived. Dr. Graham's voice came over the intercom from the medical bay. "Captain, I have 43 Velic refugees down here. 15 of them are children. If we leave now, I'm sending them back to die. I can't do that." I won't. Harper closed his eyes. He thought about his oath when he joined the service, about duty and honor, and following the chain of command. Then he thought about those children in the medical bay, about the farms burning on the planet below, about people who'd sent out a desperate call for help that only humanity had answered. Lisa, open a channel to Earth Command. Channel open, sir. Harper took a breath, knowing this would probably end his career. Earth Command. This is Captain Daniel Harper, of the Horizon's Edge. Your orders are received and acknowledged. However, I cannot and will not obey them. We came here to help people in need. I will not abandon them now. If this means court-martial, so be it. Harper out. He closed the channel before they could respond. When he turned around, his entire crew was looking at him with expressions of pride and determination. Well, Amanda said with a slight smile, I guess we're all getting court-martialed together. Assuming we survive, Kyle added. There is that. Harper agreed. He felt strangely calm. This was the right choice, regardless of consequences. Sometimes, doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. Then something happened that no one expected. Lisa's console lit up with new signals. Captain, I'm detecting 3 ships dropping out of FTL. They're not Krath. They're human ships. The view screen changed to show 3 vessels approaching their position. They weren't military ships. One was a science vessel, like the Horizon's Edge, designated Discovery's Path. Another was a large transport carrier called Unity's Hope. The third was a mining ship, the Iron Mountain, its hull scarred from years of working in asteroid fields. They're hailing us, Lisa said, barely containing her excitement. Put them through. 3 faces appeared on the screen. Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Discovery's Path spoke first. Captain Harper, we heard about your situation. We were in nearby systems when word spread about what you're doing here. We're civilian vessels, not military. But we couldn't just sit back while you face this alone. We've got cargo holds full of supplies and room for refugees, added Captain Gary Mitchell of the Unity's Hope. And we're ready to fight, if it comes to that. The third captain, a grizzled woman named Patricia Flynn from the Iron Mountain, grinned fiercely. My ship's hauled ore through pirate-infested space for 20 years. We've got industrial cutting lasers and enough raw metal to turn into kinetic missiles. The Krath want to fight? Let's give them one. Harper felt something he hadn't felt in hours. Hope. You do realize this is probably suicide, and that you'll all face charges when we get home? If we get home, Elena corrected. And frankly, Captain, I'd rather face charges than live, knowing I could have helped and didn't. We're humans. When someone calls for help, we answer. 4 ships instead of 1. Still, nothing compared to a Krath fleet, but it was better odds. Harper's mind was already working on possibilities, on strategies that might actually give them a chance. All right, he said. Welcome to the fight. Here's what we're going to do. For the next several hours, the 4 human ships prepared. Nicole Sanders worked with the other ship's engineers, sharing her knowledge about the quantum pulse. They couldn't replicate it, but they could modify their own systems to be resistant to it, so they wouldn't be affected when the Horizon's Edge used it again. Ryan Phillips coordinated with the other tactical officers. The Unity's Hope emptied its cargo holds, filling them instead with chunks of metal from the Iron Mountain. Each chunk would become a kinetic missile. Simple physics turned into devastating weapons. Jacob Torres and his security teams drilled boarding procedures with volunteers from the other ships. Most of them had never seen combat, but they learned fast. Humans had an instinct for warfare, honed over millennia of fighting on Earth. On the planet below, Elder Counselor Venom watched the human preparations with wonder. They are not fleeing, he said to his advisors. More of them are arriving. They are going to fight. Against a Krath fleet? One advisor asked. They will die. Perhaps, Venom agreed. But they will die fighting for us. for people they have never met. I have lived for 60 cycles, and I have never seen such a thing. What kind of species does this? A brave one, another advisor said quietly. Or a foolish one? Both, I think, Venom said. He thought about what Captain Harper had told him, about Deathworlds, and learning to fight against impossible odds. Perhaps survival on such a world required a certain kind of madness, a refusal to accept defeat even when defeat was certain. The Krath reinforcements arrived 6 hours later. 6 more warships dropped out of FTL, led by the massive dreadnought Conqueror's Fang. The human crews watched on their sensors as the fleet assembled. 18 warships total, enough firepower to destroy a small moon. They're moving into formation, Kyle reported from the horizon's edge. The battle began at dawn on the Velic homeworld. The human ships split into their planned formations, each with a specific role to play. The Discovery's path would use its advanced sensor arrays to blind and confuse the Krath targeting systems. The Unity's Hope would deploy its cargo pods full of ore chunks as kinetic missiles. The Iron Mountain would use its industrial cutting lasers to slice through Krath shields, and the Horizon's Edge would lead the attack directly at the dreadnought. Remember, Harper transmitted to all ships, speed and unpredictability are our advantages. The Krath fight in formations, following standard tactics. We don't. Keep them guessing, keep them reacting, make them afraid. The Krath fleet moved forward in perfect formation, a wall of armored warships advancing with the confidence of inevitable victory. Supreme War Leader Korath watched from his command throne aboard the Conqueror's Fang, expecting this to be over quickly. He was wrong. The Discovery's path fired first, but not with weapons. Captain Elena Rodriguez activated every sensor, every scanner, every detection system her ship had, then overloaded them all at once. The burst of electromagnetic radiation washed over the Krath fleet like a tidal wave of static. Sensors went haywire. Targeting computers crashed and rebooted. Communications channels filled with interference. Before the Krath could recover, the Unity's Hope fired. Captain Gary Mitchell had turned his peaceful transport carrier into an improvised weapons platform. Cargo pods shot out of launch tubes, each one filled with tons of raw ore from the Iron Mountain. They weren't sophisticated weapons. They were just metal, moving at incredible speed. But when chunks of iron and nickel weighing several tons each slammed into Krath shields at orbital velocities, sophistication didn't matter. 3 Krath destroyers took direct hits. Their shields, designed to stop energy weapons and missiles, weren't calibrated for solid projectiles moving that fast. The ore punched through like bullets through paper. 1 destroyer lost its entire port side. Another began venting atmosphere from a dozen hull breaches. The third simply broke apart, its structure unable to handle the massive kinetic impact. 3 kills, Gary reported, his voice shaking with adrenaline. The Iron Mountain came in from an unexpected angle, below the plane of the battlefield, where the Krath hadn't positioned many sensors. Captain Patricia Flynn had spent years cutting through asteroids with her ship's industrial lasers. Now, she aimed those same lasers at Krath shields, focusing the beams on single points with surgical precision. Shields were designed to distribute energy across their entire surface. Patricia's lasers didn't give them that option. She kept the beams focused on spots no larger than a coin, pouring gigawatts of energy into those tiny areas. The shields overloaded, collapsed, and suddenly 2 more Krath ships were vulnerable. That's when the Horizon's Edge attacked. Hannah Brooks pushed the ship through a dive that made the hull groan with stress. They dropped toward the dreadnought at speeds that would have been considered suicidal if anyone else had been flying. Krath weapons fire filled the space around them, plasma and missiles and kinetic rounds trying to swat them from the sky. But Hannah had grown up racing through canyons at supersonic speeds, threading needles that other pilots wouldn't even attempt. She spun the ship, rolled it, made it dance through the incoming fire like a leaf caught in a hurricane. Not a single shot connected. "Nicole, I hope your modifications work," Harper said, gripping his armrests as the ship shook from the violent maneuvers. "Only one way to find out," the engineer replied. The Horizon's Edge had used its quantum pulse once already, and it had taken hours to recharge. But Nicole had been working on the system, refining it, making it more efficient. She fired it again, and this time the pulse was focused, concentrated on just the ships directly ahead of them. The Conqueror's fangs shuddered as the exotic energy washed over it. Shields flickered. Weapons went offline. For just a moment, the mighty dreadnought was vulnerable. "Fire everything," Harper ordered. Every weapon the Horizon's Edge had opened fire simultaneously. Mining charges, modified missiles, even their point defense lasers, all focusing on one spot: the Dreadnought's bridge. The concentrated barrage overwhelmed the Dreadnought's defenses. Explosions rippled across its hull. The bridge took a direct hit, and suddenly Supreme War Leader Korath found himself surrounded by sparking consoles and injured crew members. But the Dreadnought wasn't destroyed. It was too massive, too well armored. The damage was significant, but not fatal. Korath pulled himself up, ignoring the pain from his injuries, and looked at the small human ship that had just bloodied him. "All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel," he ordered. "Kill them." The entire Krath fleet turned its attention to the Horizon's Edge. Hundreds of weapons locked on. Enough firepower to vaporize a moon. Hannah tried to evade, but there were too many shots, coming from too many directions. "Brace for impact," Amanda shouted. Then three things happened at once. Jacob Torres, still aboard the captured Krath cruiser, managed to bring its main weapons fully online. He fired directly into the side of the Krath formation, hitting them where their shields were weakest. Two ships took critical damage, forced to fall back or risk total destruction. The Discovery's path rammed one of the Krath heavy cruisers. Captain Elena Rodriguez had seen that the Horizon's Edge was about to be destroyed and made a split-second decision. Her ship wasn't armed for combat, but it was still a several thousand-ton vessel moving at high speed. The impact was catastrophic for both ships, but it drew fire away from the Horizon's Edge at a critical moment. And the Unity's Hope launched its final volley of kinetic missiles, not at the Krath ships, but at the space between them and the Horizon's Edge. Tons of metal created a temporary barrier, absorbing and deflecting the incoming fire just long enough for Hannah to get them clear. "Elena!" Harper shouted into the comm, but there was no response. The Discovery's path was breaking apart, its hull shattered by the collision. He watched on sensors as escape pods began launching. Some would make it. Many wouldn't. "Captain, we need to fall back," Amanda said urgently. "We've hurt them, but they still outnumber us. If we stay, we'll all die." She was right. They destroyed or disabled 9 Krath ships, an incredible achievement for 4 civilian vessels. But 9 remained, including the wounded but still dangerous Dreadnought, and the humans had lost the Discovery's path, with the Unity's Hope and Iron Mountain both taking serious damage. Harper was about to give the order to retreat when Kyle's console started beeping urgently. "Captain, I'm detecting new FTL signatures. Multiple ships jumping in." The young technician's face went pale. "Krath reinforcements. It's over." But Kyle was wrong about who was arriving. 20 ships dropped out of FTL, and they weren't Krath. They were Velic defensive ships, old and outdated, barely armed. Behind them came ships from other species, ones that had ignored the original distress call. There were Thren science vessels, Golmar trading ships, even a few Zaxxon diplomatic cruisers. "This is Captain Myrev of the Thren Exploration Fleet," a new voice came through the comm. "We heard what humanity did here, how you stood alone against the Krath when no one else would. We were wrong to stay away. We were cowards. If you're still fighting, then we're fighting with you." More voices joined in, a chorus of alien species all saying the same thing. They'd been shamed by humanity's courage. They'd seen that someone could stand up to the Krath and survive, and they weren't going to let humans fight alone anymore. The Krath fleet found itself suddenly outnumbered. The new arrivals weren't all military vessels, and many were poorly armed, but there were dozens of them, and they were angry. Inns, The aftermath of the battle was a mixture of triumph and sorrow. The Horizon's edge drifted through the debris field, her hull scarred with burns and impact marks, but still intact. Around her, the other ships of the impromptu human fleet were in similar condition. The Iron Mountain had lost one of her engines and was venting atmosphere from several breaches. The Unity's Hope had taken damage to her cargo bays and life support systems, and the Discovery's path was gone. Broken apart. In her final, heroic, ramming attack, Captain Harper stood on his bridge, coordinating rescue operations. Search and rescue teams. Focus on the Discovery's path debris field. I want every escape pod recovered, every survivor brought in. Elena and her crew didn't die for nothing. Dr. Graham worked tirelessly in the medical bay, treating wounded from multiple species. Human crew members lay next to Velic refugees, Thren officers beside Golmar traders. The battle had united them all in blood and sacrifice. His staff moved between beds, offering treatment and comfort. How many did we lose? Harper asked quietly when Amanda came to stand beside him. 37 crew from the Discovery's path. 23 confirmed dead, 14 still missing. We're hoping some of those made it to the planet's surface in escape pods. Amanda paused, her voice heavy. 5 killed aboard the Unity's Hope when they took that direct hit to Cargo Bay 3. 2 from the Iron Mountain, caught in a decompression when the hull was breached. And we lost one. Ensign Katie Morris. She was in the sensor array when it took damage. Harper closed his eyes. 65 people dead, dozens more wounded. The price of doing the right thing. He wondered if it was worth it, then immediately felt ashamed for the thought. How could he put a price on the lives they'd saved? Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the planet, Lisa said from her console. It's Elder Counselor Venom. Put him through. The Velic leader appeared on screen, and he looked older than before, worn down by the stress and horror of the past days. But his eyes held something that hadn't been there before. Hope. Captain Harper, Venom said, his voice thick with emotion. Because of your intervention, because you answered our call when no one else would, 300,000 Velic survived. 300,000 lives that would have been lost. I do not have words sufficient to express our gratitude. Harper felt the weight of those words. 300,000 people alive because his crew had chosen to fight. That was worth 65 human lives, wasn't it? It had to be. Your people fought bravely, Counselor, Harper replied, and they died saving mine. As we will remember you, Venom said, every Velic child will learn the story of the humans who came from their death world to save us. Your names will be spoken with reverence for generations. You have changed everything, Captain. Not just for us, but for the entire galaxy. After the call ended, Harper walked to the observation deck. He stood there, looking out at the stars, at the damaged ships, and the planet below, where 300,000 people were beginning to rebuild their lives. He thought about Elena Rodriguez and her crew, about Katie Morris, about all the others who'd paid the ultimate price. Jacob Torres found him there an hour later. The security chief's uniform was torn and stained with blood, not all of it his own. He'd fought hand-to-hand aboard the captured Krath cruiser, had killed and nearly been killed himself. You all right, Captain? Jacob asked. Honestly? I don't know. Harper turned to face him. We won, Jacob. We actually won. But the cost is always too high, Jacob finished. I know. I've been in combat before. Back on Earth. Every life lost weighs on you, but you need to remember something. Those people didn't die because you made a bad call. They died because they chose to do the right thing. Just like you did. Just like we all did. Earth Command is going to crucify me when we get back. Maybe. Jacob smiled slightly. Or maybe they'll pin a medal on you. Either way, you did what needed doing. Sometimes that's all that matters. Over the next few days, the full scope of what had happened began to emerge. The battle in the Velic system had been broadcast across multiple communication networks. Dozens of species had watched as humanity, barely 50 years into space travel, had stood against the mighty Krath Imperium, and won. The political implications were enormous. Species that had been terrorized by the Krath for decades suddenly saw that resistance was possible. The Galactic Council, which had largely ignored humanity until now, suddenly wanted to know everything about these aggressive Deathworlders. And most surprisingly, Earth Command sent a new transmission. Harper read it 3 times, hardly believing the words. "They're not court-martialing us," he announced to his senior officers. "They're promoting us. All of us." "What?" Amanda looked shocked. "But we disobeyed direct orders." Apparently, the public response back on Earth has been overwhelmingly positive. People are calling us heroes. The government can't very well punish us when the entire planet is celebrating what we did. Harper shook his head in disbelief. "They're making this into a recruitment campaign. Join the exploration service, defend the innocent, explore the stars. We're becoming poster children for humanity's expansion into space." Nicole laughed from the engineering station. "So, we went from potential court-martial to propaganda tools. I'm not sure that's better. End and B. 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 It's definitely better than prison," Kyle pointed out. The transmission continued with more news. 3 dozen alien species had formally requested meetings with Earth's government. Trade agreements were being proposed. Defense pacts were being discussed. Humanity's act of selfless courage had opened doors that diplomacy alone never could have. Captain Mirev of the Thren visited the horizon's edge, personally, his ship docking carefully with the damaged human vessel. He was a tall, thin being, with translucent skin and 4 arms. And he carried himself with the dignity of someone who'd spent decades exploring the galaxy. "Captain Harper," he said through the translator, "I must apologize. We received the Velic distress call, just as you did. We chose not to respond because we feared the Krath. We told ourselves it was pragmatism, that we couldn't help everyone, that interfering would only lead to more death. You came eventually," Harper said. "That's what matters. We came because you shamed us." Mirev corrected. "You showed us that courage exists, that it's possible to stand against tyranny even when the odds are impossible. Your species is young, Captain. But you have already taught the older races an important lesson. Sometimes, the right thing to do is also the hard thing to do." More visitors came. The Golmar offered trade agreements. The Zaxxon proposed a cultural exchange program. Even some of the species that hadn't participated in the battle sent messages of support and admiration. Humanity had become, overnight, one of the most respected species in known space. But perhaps the most meaningful moment came when a small Velic shuttle landed near the horizon's edge. A group of children emerged. Shepherded by adult caretakers, they carried flowers and drawings, small gifts made with their own hands. Dr. Graham met them at the airlock, and the children crowded around him, touching his hands, his face, as if unable to believe he was real. One small child, barely waist-high, looked up at him with huge eyes. "Are you really from a death world?" the child asked, in halting universal language. "Yes," Graham replied gently. "My home is called Earth. It's a dangerous place, but it's also beautiful. Were you scared? When you fought the bad aliens?" Graham knelt down to the child's level. "I was terrified. But I couldn't let fear stop me from helping you. Sometimes, being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing the right thing anyway." The children left their gifts throughout the ship. Drawings of humans fighting monsters. Flowers carefully preserved for the long journey through space. Small handmade tokens that would have no value to anyone else, but meant everything to the crew who received them. Harper kept one of the drawings in his ready room. It showed a crude representation of the horizon's edge, surrounded by stars, with the words, "Thank you for saving us," written in both Velic and human script. A week after the battle, The human ships were ready to depart. Repairs had been made. Though they were temporary, the vessels were spaceworthy enough to make it back to human space. But they'd need extensive work in a proper shipyard. The Velic organized a ceremony on their homeworld. Thousands gathered to watch as human crew members were given the highest honors their culture could bestow. Elder Counselor Venom personally presented Captain Harper with a crystal that represented courage and sacrifice. "You have saved our species," Venom said, his voice amplified so all could hear. "We were facing extinction, and you stopped it. Not for profit, not for power, but simply because it was right. This is what we will remember about humanity. That when we called into the darkness, they answered. That when we needed help, they came. That when we had given up hope, they gave it back to us." Harper accepted the crystal, feeling its weight in his hands. "We did what anyone should do, Counselor. We helped someone who needed help. I hope that when we need it, others will do the same for us." "They will," Venom promised. "Because of what you did here, because you showed the galaxy that courage still exists, they will. You have changed everything, Captain Harper. The strong no longer dominate simply because they are strong. The weak are no longer helpless. You have proven that determination and moral courage can overcome brute force." The human ships departed the Velic system together, escorted by vessels from a dozen different species, all wanting to be part of the journey, to be associated with the Deathworlders who'd done the impossible. Captain Harper sat in his chair on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the stars streak past as they jumped to FTL. His ship was damaged, his crew was exhausted, and they'd lost good people. But they'd also saved 300,000 lives and changed the political landscape of the galaxy. "You think we'll be remembered?" Hannah asked from the helm. "I mean, really remembered. Not just as a footnote in history?" Harper thought about the drawings from the Velic children, about the Allied fleet that had rallied to help them, about the messages still coming in from across known space. He thought about humanity's future among the stars, no longer as newcomers to be dismissed or threatened, but as defenders of the innocent, protectors of the weak. "I think we'll be remembered," he said finally. "But, more importantly, I think we've set a precedent. From now on, when someone sends out a distress call, they'll remember that humans answered. They'll hope that maybe, just maybe, those crazy Deathworlders will show up to help. And you know what? Sometimes we will." "Is that our role now?" Amanda asked. "Galactic protectors? Maybe. Or maybe we're just people doing the right thing. Either way, I'm proud of what we did here. Proud of all of you. I'm Clan. In Rexit. I'm Clan Watcher. I'm proud of all of you." The Horizon's Edge continued her journey home, carrying a crew that had learned something important about themselves and their species. They'd learned that humans, forged in the harsh crucible of a death world, had emerged not as conquerors or tyrants, but as defenders. That when faced with impossible odds, they didn't back down. That when someone called for help, across the vast darkness of space, they answered, and the galaxy would never be quite the same again. Pired by what these Deathworlders had accomplished, Supreme War Leader Korath looked at his tactical display and felt something he'd never experienced in decades of warfare. Fear. Not fear of death, but fear of failure, of defeat, of having to report to Fleet Admiral Zargoth that he'd lost to a ragtag group of civilian ships, led by a species barely out of their own solar system. "All ships, withdraw," he ordered. "Supreme War Leader?" his second-in-command asked in shock. "We are Krath. We do not retreat. We do today," Korath said grimly. "Look at them. They don't fight like any species we've encountered. They don't follow the rules. They don't know when they're beaten. If we stay, we might win. But at what cost? We could lose the entire fleet trying to destroy these Deathworlders." The Krath ships turned and fled, jumping to FTL one by one, leaving the system they'd come to conquer. It was the first time in living memory that a Krath fleet had retreated from battle. The Allied ships erupted in celebration. The Velic, on the planet's surface, wept with relief and joy, and aboard the horizon's edge, Harper's crew sat in stunned silence, unable to believe they'd actually won. "The dreadnought is taking the center position." "Of course it is," Harper muttered. "That's where the commander would be. He wants to watch us die personally." The Krath transmitted a message. "Supreme War Leader." Korath's face filled the view screen. "Alien and intimidating. Human vessels. You have one chance to surrender. Power down your weapons, transfer control of your ships to us, and you will be taken as prisoners. Refuse, and you will be destroyed." Harper looked at his crew, then at the other captains on secondary screens. He saw the same determination on every face. "This is Captain Daniel Harper. Here's our response. No deals with slavers. No mercy for those who commit genocide. Leave this system, or be destroyed." Korath's expression didn't change, but there was something in his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or maybe just anticipation of an interesting fight. So be it. Today, you learn why the Krath Imperium is feared across 100 worlds. "And today," Harper replied, "you learn why you should never anger Deathworlders." Yet they did, Commander. Vexoth felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Doubt. A Class 12 Deathworld meant a planet where nearly everything was lethal, where survival required constant vigilance and fighting. Species from such worlds were rare, and they were always dangerous. "All ships, concentrate fire on that human vessel," he ordered. "Kill them now, before they do any more damage." But the horizon's edge was already gone, dancing through the battlefield like a ghost, using superior maneuvering to stay ahead of enemy fire. And aboard the captured Krath cruiser, humans were learning to use alien weapons, turning the Krath's own strength against them. The battle had just begun, and already, the Krath were learning a hard lesson. Never underestimate Deathworlders. "I'm not ordering anyone to stay," Harper said quietly. "We have 2 shuttles. Anyone who wants to leave can take them. Jump to FTL. Head back to human space. No judgment. No shame. This isn't your fight." No one moved. "It is our fight," Amanda said firmly. "The moment we heard that distress call, it became our fight." Damn right," Jacob added. Harper felt pride swell in his chest. This was what humanity was, what they could be at their best. Not conquerors or empire builders, but defenders, protectors, people who ran toward danger when others ran away. "All right then," he said. "Let's go to war. Maybe that history would matter now. Maybe being from Earth, from a world that demanded strength from its children, would make a difference." "Captain, we're approaching the system." Lisa's voice came through the intercom, pulling Harper from his thoughts. He stood and walked back to the bridge. "Drop us out of FTL at the system's edge. Let's see what we're dealing with before we commit." The stars snapped back into focus. Before them was a yellow sun with several planets. The 4th planet glowed on their screens, but not with the light of cities or civilization. It glowed with fire. "My God," Amanda whispered. The planet's surface was burning. Orbital bombardment, systematic and thorough. And in orbit above it, a fleet of alien warships continued their terrible work, raining destruction on a world that could no longer defend itself.